Zach, when you look back on Project Ragtag, the whole Amy Hennig Star Wars project, what do you think of? What's that era defined as in your mind?
I mean, it's tough to say. Like, I actually had a lot of fun working on that game, and I think that we were on the path to making something cool. I think that path was longer than the company wanted, and I do think that part of that was Frostbite, right? Like trying to make this game. And so, I just wish, I think the timing was weird, and the sequence of events where like, hey, we have the studio that has their own engine and they make really like high quality single player games, right? The Dead Space series, right? And then we're going to take that studio, move them to Frostbite and have them make like a Battlefield game, right? And okay, I'm fine with that. And I stayed there and I kept working on that. That's cool. But like we had a lot of people in the studio that were experts at like narrative and, these single player games, right? And those people left and that's fine. Like, and some of them went to Crystal Dynamics and worked on the Avengers game, you know? And so, that kind of stuff happens. Okay, that's cool. And we went and we hired a bunch of like, multiplayer first person shooter experts to come in and help us with Hardline. Cool. So to ship Hardline and then go, hey, you guys are going to now make a single player, like third person, that's the thing that like, it's hard for me to get over that. Like who is making this plan? Like there's no plan, obviously, right? Because we were experts at this type of game 2 years ago. And you like remade our studio. And that was really hard to like remake our studio. And we pulled it off. And then right when we're done, it's kind of like, hey, go back to what you guys did before. And we're like, but the guys that were really good at what we did before left, and then we brought in Amy and that was awesome. Like having, getting a chance to work with Amy was amazing and seeing, just how focused and how driven she is and just how like, man, like clever, like just the way she thinks about like integrating story with, like, I can't think of a better word than just clever. Like she comes up with something like, man, that's like really clever. Like I wouldn't have thought of that. It was really a cool experience. It was just like, we are not set up for success here and it doesn't feel like our own doing. And that was probably the most frustrating part, right? It feels like, we're just put in this situation that like is not our making.
Yeah. Were you, talking to a lot of the higher ups in this era as well, or were you taking more of a backseat, just focusing on level design?
I was. When Hardline ended and they took the team to go make Star Wars, I actually stayed. I was on a 3-person team that was pitching a new game, and we went all the way up to the head of publishing with that pitch. And so I was, and the studio GM at that point was just a really good friend of mine, right? We had worked in production together. He was my boss earlier in my career. And so like, I just had like a much more direct connection to like what was going on. But yeah, kind of like once we sort of finished, once they kind of shot down our pitch for a second game and said, no, all hands on Star Wars, I started getting like the future of the studio. I started getting a bad vibe about the future of the studio. Like, oh, all our eggs are in this one basket. This isn't necessarily the thing we're good at. We can do this really well, but like, the time frame they have in their minds, it's not the same time frame. We're going to need more time. And
then it was, okay, shoot up the flare. Let's bring in EA Motive, have them support the studio as well.
Yeah, no, yep. I forgot about that. Yeah. So then it was EA Motive joined and, and there was in Vancouver also, right? So we had the Vancouver team and by the end, our EP was sitting in Vancouver, right? So we didn't, it was like the creative director was Amy in Redwood City and the GM was in Redwood City and like, but our, they combined 2 teams. There was another team in Vancouver that their game got canceled and they just kind of mushed us together and really some really talented people on that team, but it wasn't like the right mix, right? It wasn't like the things that we were missing, they didn't necessarily have. And the things that we were missing or they were missing, we didn't necessarily have,
Yeah. So then by the end of the project, was it just watching Amy get more and more frustrated or what was the implosion like then?
No, Amy's like pro. So you didn't really see that.
That's
like,
nice.
Like I'm sure she was frustrated, but, I was more seeing, on my side of things, like, I think that we had this like leadership team come in from Vancouver and I want to separate because there's some amazing people on the team in Vancouver, like engineers, artists, like we had designers, some like really talented people. But I think that the leadership team that came in were like, and not knocking them, they were just in the same position I was in Army of Two.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it was like, hey, we got to ship this thing. Let's go. Like, in there, cut this, cut this, cut this, cut this. I'm sitting over here going, hey, this is effing Amy Hennig. Like, we have a chance to make the greatest Star Wars game ever made and a possible Game of the Year contender. Like, this isn't an Army of Two game. Like, what are you guys doing, right?
Yeah.
And funny enough, that leadership team was also on Army of Two. They helped out with Army of Two as well, that Vancouver team.
Oh, for just like wrapping stuff up over there?
Yeah, I think they did like a couple of the levels, maybe 3 or 4 levels.
From Vancouver. Oh, okay. Yep. Interesting.
Yep.
So how do you think it would have, if you would have been given another, 2 years, something like that?
Yeah.
How do you feel like that game would have fared? What would it have been like?
Yeah, I think we would have made the best Star Wars game ever made. I think that the question on and that's not knocking any other Star Wars game ever made, by the way. It's just like the story and the setup and the characters. Like, man, it was set up for success. It was just, we had to go execute, and the execution was going to take a while. And I think even the company saw that, like, hey, you guys are eventually going to make like a crazy good game. I think that at the time, when we got shut down, Patrick Sutherland kept talking about what's the game with Winner Winner Chicken Dinner?
PUBG,
and like, these are the new experiences, the future experiences. And they even said they sent a press release out where it's like, no one cares about single player anymore. So like, part of it was that they just didn't feel like that there was a ceiling on these single player experiences, that like, hey, we want to go and put out these games that like sell 20 million units and then continue to sell DLC for years later. And that's not the game we were making. We were making like, this is the game, this is it, and it's going to be a 12-hour experience, and it's going to be amazingly well crafted, but that's it, and I think that, if you're looking at like trends, I do understand where they're coming from, right? If you're looking at trends in games, you're seeing all these like bigger multiplayer games doing well, and maybe single player feels like it's dying off and not worth that much investment. I just wish they had figured that out, 2 years earlier.
That's the bizarre thing. Then they released Jedi Fallen Order, and it's like, oh, it lights up the sales charts last year, and it's a great game.
For sure. Other single player games have as well, and why ours didn't make it, I mean, granted, we were definitely sitting in one of the most expensive places to have a dev team. But to your point, Jedi Fallen Order was in LA, right? Like, also a super expensive place.
Yeah. So what do you think was the best part about Ragtag? What were you most excited about outside of the clever narrative overall? But like, were there set pieces or just story beats that are like, this would have been so effing cool?
Yeah, I mean, it was the story beats. It was the set pieces, right? And getting back to that, like, working on hardline multiplayer for a few years there. It's like, it's very much like about second to second gameplay and balancing everything perfectly together and all this. And, getting back into that, like, sort of, we're telling a story and there's these big beats and these big moments and these big set pieces. I hadn't done that since Dead Space or like Dante's Inferno or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So getting back to that was cool. There's those wow moments, right? It's hard to put out like a Battlefield multiplayer trailer where you're like, wow, because it's a multiplayer match. People are shooting each other. It's good, but it's not, it's like when you see like an Uncharted trailer, right? There's moments in there where you're just like, how did they make that? Oh my God. Like, how does that play? I need to play that. I need to see what that experience is like, right?
Yeah.
So it's like missing out on those opportunities, right?
Do you feel like that snippet that we saw of the character like walking out, Tatooine looking environment, the ship flying over, you think that represented the game pretty well, or was that a pretty rough concept?
Visually, yeah, but I mean, there was so much more to that game, right? Like, it didn't really represent the gameplay, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and we just had a lot of gameplay that people just never got to see. We had levels, they weren't done, but they were close. We had one set piece that was basically done. We were putting the final touches on it right when the studio got closed down, like this crazy ATST like chase moment that was like, it was really cool. It was really cool.
You were piloting the ATST?
Yeah. No. You were running from it. You were on foot running from it. And it was like trying to hunt you down. And so, but you're more agile and slipping through all these alleyways and just like barreling through and crashing and like, using all the destruction and frostbite and just, yeah.
Did they
time, like it had spotlight. It was just cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Was it running towards the camera? Coming from Uncharted?
Like back and forth. Yeah. Yes, no, for sure. Like you would have been like, oh, that's like Star Wars Uncharted. Like,
yeah, Crash Bandicoot. I mean,
we were definitely looking at those Uncharted games a lot as inspiration.
Does it bum you out to know that that's probably sitting on a server somewhere still? Like never going to see the light of day?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I'd never really worked on a game that made it that far and got canceled, like, and so, and honestly, like the way I always looked at my career was like game by game, right? So I'd like finish a game, and then EA would be like, hey, you're gonna work on Dead Space 3, and I'd be like, okay, cool, and I see the counter, I go, okay, like I'm not gonna think about my career for 2 years, like
Right.
until this game, like I'm just gonna think about Dead Space 3, and then when that's done, like I'll either get a next game or something else will happen, but like I'm not going to worry about it, right? And so I was in full like not going to worry about it mode. Like, hey, I'm going to be doing this for the next year and a half, and then I had a kid 2 days before it got canceled, and so like all that was kind of like put together, and man, that one burns for sure, and like yeah, like it like I don't think about it very often because it like it's the one for me that like got away. It just kind of is what it is.
What Ben, by the way, thank you for being so patient.
No, I was just going to say, as one of the only people in the world who was not on the dev team who got to play that game, like whatever small bits that you guys had made, I think I played Will's level when I came back to visit the studio or whatever. I'm super disappointed that thing didn't come out. Like that thing, that it had so much potential and such wonderful, wonderful, talented people on it. That when I think the most disappointed people should be the people that didn't get to play it, because I think it would be such a good game to come out. But again, as Zach said, I think it was more like a financial thing if they didn't want to give it the time really to work.
The also just outside of like the video game part of it, the main character in the game, right? Like our main character, who was played by Todd Stashwick, who's also one of the writers of the game. So him and Amy were writing the game together. Like it was such a well-formed character.
Yeah.
Like it's just a great character for the Star Wars universe, and he was nailing it,
Kind of like a rogue, a little bit darker than Han Solo, somewhere in that realm.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And just, man, like what he was bringing to the role, and the rest of the actors, Amy went out and got that. And not to knock, I'm not knocking any actors that I ever worked with before, but like these were top tier like actors, and it was noticeable. She would come back from shoots where you're like just watching them walk around ping pong ball suits, and and fake it's like they're supposed to be in a land speeder, but it's just these like bars on a motion capture stage, and it's like super compelling. You're like, what happens next, Amy? Wait, what happens next, right? And so yeah.
Yeesh. So he went from the rogue to having a heart of gold. Is that the arc?
I wouldn't say that it was like the typical Heart of Gold arc. No, I mean, I think that for sure, like he wasn't like a totally selfish character, but I think that throughout the game, he is looking out for his best interest, right? And not an evil character, right? Like just, like when you say rogue, it's like, well, a lot of, it's like he's a little anti-authority, right? But there's not necessarily, especially in the Star Wars universe, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? And so,
but I really wanted to see that character too, because he was like more of a gambler. He was like, I don't know if they have drinking in the Star Wars universe, but like that was whenever I got the flavor of the game. I'm speaking as a secondhand fan. I did not work on the game, but it did feel more like he was, like you could see him with like different, swagger and stuff. And I agree with Zach. I think that character like fits perfectly in that like grimy sort of space grime really is kind of Star Wars, right?
Like maybe like a little bit of like a mix of like Robin Hood and then the dude from Guardians of, the main
Star-Lord,
Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, like a little bit of like the kind of that style character, right?
Okay.
Like,
yeah. You mentioned before we started recording that you haven't played Jedi Fallen Order yet.
No, it's on the backlog.
I get it.
Some of that is just I haven't gotten to it. Some of that is like I don't know if I'm ready for like I'm kind of down on Star Wars. Nothing to do with Star Wars. It's just like I really like Star Wars is my favorite movie growing up, and I was like really excited to like make a contribution to Star Wars canon, and then when that was like gone, it's like hard to like be excited about someone else's Star Wars thing, And the other thing that I really liked about Ragtag is the Jedi, you know, like for me, I've always been drawn to like the Han Solo characters and, you know, sort of like, hey, you know, we're really focused on, in the original trilogy, you're really focused on like Luke's journey and him, you know, sort of becoming a Jedi. And so that's this big focus, but he's like the only one, right? If you zoom out in that universe, like no one else is thinking about Jedi or swinging around lightsabers. And so I was always like interested in like the rest of the world, you know, like what's Han Solo got going on, like you know, meeting up with the rebellion and all that, right?
Right. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.